All right, hard yarners. Today we were joined by Katie Ashby Coppens by the the Aligned Council of Australia, and Chloe Getters.
Hi, I'm back and I brought my friends.
Yes. So, very good episode in which we talk a lot about the pandemic treaty. We're doing this as a series. This is the first one focused on surveillance. We definitely touch on surveillance and a few things. We go on some tangents around COVID. But before we get on what we spoke about, this episode is brought to you by alltradescover.com.au. All Trades Cover. Do you need anything insured there, Katie? Maybe life in general at the moment.
Does he do sense of sanity?
Oh, yeah, well, this is... but anyway, if you are a tradie specifically, this is something they focus on really well. They want the big business, small business, a small-sized tradie, sole trader, big or construction company, whatever it is. If you're a tradie, hit them up. They're going to be able to give you a very competitive quote. And one thing, having listened to them the other day talk about it a lot, was the people who and ah about getting some sort of protection, some sort of insurance, and then regret it in the long term. They end up having to pay more. So when you are in that trade stuff, anything can happen anytime. Sometimes it's not even your fault. If you're not covered, you don't want to be up the clock with when it regards to your finances. So hit them up. Also, speaking of finances, this episode is also brought to you by Crafted Finance. Have you met my friend Ted?
No, so this is a newbie. Let's go into it.
Yeah,
Who's
so
Crafted?
Ted is Luke and Zoe from Crafted Finance. They specialise in mortgages, but they help you with your assets, with your asset loans, personal loans, and a lot of other things.
You were talking about Baz.
Yes,
to Baz about this.
Yeah,
this is like they're not.
So it's
like, what's the best deal for you? Not we're just trying to like hook you in
Correct.
And get you on the plan.
Yeah,
what's actually going to work out?
A lot of mortgage brokers will be like, okay, I'm going to do whatever I can to get you the loan, no matter what interest you're going to pay and all that. They are really interested in helping you get the best possible long-term loan, so you're paying the least amount of interest. They'll present to you all options. You've got the choice, which is always good to have a choice. They will present to you options where you maybe you're paying more interest long-term, but it's less upfront payments. They'll present everything to you, but they'll give it to you black and white, so you know exactly what you're doing.
Respecting the importance of choice and sovereignty.
Exactly.
I love it. Thank you.
Instead of being disillusioned with the banking system, because we know how terrible it is and the profits that they make, instead they thought, well, how can we help people if we're in that area? Instead of just leaving the system, let's give people the best service we possibly can. And they are great people. So that's a really good plug for them, but it's a real honest one, and I can say it because he's a mate and he very like-minded. So get involved. Crafted Finance, especially if you're looking at getting in the housing market, they're going to be really good. But car loans, whatnot, all that sort of stuff they can help you with. So Crafted Finance, the website is in our show notes and in our bio on Instagram. But this is a long intro. We're joined by Katie Ashby Coppens. What did we talk about today, Katie?
Yeah, we had a great session today, thank you, and a real good opportunity just to let people know what's going on at a more global level with the World Health Organization, which is the United Nations for health, and really whether or not it's still for health. We reflected on the World Health Organization's response to COVID and how that filtered down to our own countries, and whether or not this is an organization that we should be trusting for future pandemics, which they keep promising us.
Yeah, so very heavily surrounded by the surveillance conversation. We do go on a few tangents and how that sort of affected us, but it was a pretty decent conversation surrounding that response. And for anyone who, for whatever reason, has been living under a rock, doesn't know what the pandemic treaty is, very broadly speaking, it's a deal that Australia is committed to, not signed yet, but committed to being a part of, in which we basically adhere to the World Health Organization's recommendations under the guise of a pandemic or a health...
A fake.
A fake.
And you have to listen to the episode to find out what that means.
The fake, yeah, correct. But, very important episode, and this is, and I'll stress that this is a part 1 of 3, and we're going to go into all areas of it. So very looking forward to the other episodes. But thanks so much, Katie, and... let's get hard.
Welcome to Hard Yarns Podcast.
I am fucking fat.
Anything Chris White says, please disregard it.
5D is actually a state of being. It's a unity consciousness.
That was Hard Yarns with me, Frankie Rose. So I'm going to throw it over to your co-host,
Daniel Delby.
And Cameron Brand.
I would do this and then I'd gong.
Free in attendance for the millions listening at home. Let's get hard.
All right. So, we're on. This is the first in a bit of a series. I'm pretty excited about this. Welcome back, Chloe.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
Mate, always good to have you, especially talking about health and you're not feeling too well.
Well, you know, there's a lot that can be said for vitamin C.
Yes. Yeah, so Katie, do you want to, I guess, give us a bit of a rundown who you are and what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Katie Ashby Coppens, a lawyer based in Australia, and I am I guess, advocate for a lot of issues that really arose during the COVID-19 period around human rights and the right to choose. And I was doing that on both sides of the Tasman. So in New Zealand, I'm head of legal for Voices for Freedom and Reality Check Radio. And in Australia, I've got the privilege of being one of the co-founders of the Aligned Council of Australia. And a lot of the work that I'm doing is really to push back against the World Health Organization pandemic treaties, which they've been working on at lightning speed since COVID, blaming COVID, but for really the opportunity to do COVID all again.
And so what's the area we're going to be focusing on today, Chloe?
I believe, Miss Katie Ashby Coppens, we are focusing on the surveillance aspect of the pandemic treaty and international health regulations. Am I correct?
That's absolutely right. So we've got 2 pandemic treaties that have been worked on since or under the guise of COVID by the World Health Organization. Now, the World Health Organization is the United Nations branch of health. It's supposedly made up of the 194 member states, so each country has a representative seat at the table, and they get to vote. And so when it's all countries working together, which they looked and aimed to do after the Second World War, that was the whole intentions of it. And, you know, the World Health Organization could be a body that responded to health issues, particularly in lower socioeconomic countries, but also when it came to pandemics, should they arise. Unfortunately, since or prior to COVID, and certainly since the 2000s, the WHO has really ceased to act as a World Health Organization, as an undemocratic body that represents the interests of the 194 nations, and started to move a little bit sideways and starting to take money from other organisations such as philanthropic organisations or vaccine organisations or pharmaceutical companies. And as a consequence, their recommendations and the like have changed. And we could see that very clearly with COVID. Prior to COVID, the evidence-based recommendations were don't shut down countries, don't mask healthy people, don't shut down schools or workplaces unless you absolutely need to. And post-COVID, very quickly after COVID, those recommendations certainly changed. So the World Health Organization gets to declare the pandemic, make the recommendations, and our countries all ran headlong into those recommendations and possibly on steroids as opposed to taking them at face value.
Now, we've recently, have we signed the treaty, or is that officially done the 19th of July from memory? Was that right?
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing because they've been doing a couple of different treaties at lockstep. So if I start with the pandemic regulations, they were the 2005 regulations that were around during COVID. That allows the World Health Organization to declare a pandemic and make recommendations to cope with it. But a country is very much able to push back or actually not follow those recommendations because they are recommendations. They amended those regulations and 2024 they were adopted, and so we have until the 19th of July to expressly reject those amendments Otherwise, we've got to implement them by the 19th of September. So that's the pandemic regulations. Different and separate is an entirely new treaty, which is called the Pandemic Agreement, and that is what was adopted in May of this year at the World Health Assembly with the 194 countries supposedly present. But the Pandemic Agreement is not finished. It's not ready to be signed. So they're at least another year away before it will have the very awful annexure, which we can get to soon, completed for us to, or for any country to be able to sign. So we'll sign, the Pandemic Agreement is extremely important because what that does is it creates the commercial, the commercial aspect of the pandemic industrial complex, whereas the regulations just allow the WHO to declare pandemic, make the recommendations. So two documents working together to really create a whole perfect circle of perpetual pandemics.
So what does that mean for Australia at this point? Where are we situated? Because I have seen other countries have not declared that they're going to be involved in this, but we have, I guess, essentially said, what was his name?
Mike Butler.
Yes, has committed that we are going to be part of this. So where are we situated in regards to that?
At this stage, I fear, and especially with our new government, that we are very much heading headlong into both pandemic treaties, that there will be little interest given to the 19th of July and rejecting the pandemic regulations, and I suspect when the pandemic agreement is ready for signature next year, that Mark Butler or Penny Wong, it will be no doubt if she remains the Minister of Finance and Trade, will be putting her paw print on that document as soon as she can.
So the concern for me straight away is that one, the handling of the COVID pandemic was a perfect example of how not to handle it and going against your own science, which was ironic considering their messaging for the whole thing was trust the science. We see that they weren't trusting the science and making decisions based on what appeared to be, I didn't even know.
Just friendships floating around on the outside.
Yeah.
A little back scratching seemed to have more influence than
certainly
the evidence.
And like a perfect example of that, and this I know doesn't go into surveillance, but a perfect example of that is being censored and shut down for suggesting that kids, there's no evidence. I remember saying this on this podcast, saying there's no evidence at all for children having COVID vaccinations are going to have any benefit, nor is there any safety studies on this. And I said that on our podcast. I clipped it up, and I remember it got taken down for misinformation, even though I was reading on their own World Health Organization websites that was the case. And this is a perfect example of now we see it's been removed, or the recommendations have been removed, and even worse, that there's a potential net negative for children to have the COVID vaccinations, which is that's hugely concerning if that's their if that's their issue, that they're sort of
or the framework that they're trying to instill for sure.
If they're going to make these decisions based on what seems to be almost no evidence, what's to stop them from doing it in the future?
And how can you trust them? So I've actually got a really good story about that, what you were reading from the World Health Organization's website, the warning that there were no tests for the childhood age group. The day we took the kids case in New Zealand to stop the rollout for the 5 to 12-year-olds on that basis, we used in our opening the WHO's website, which said there is no tests or trials for this age group, this shouldn't be recommended for this age group. The very day that we raised that, that was taken down from the WHO's website, but it wasn't just taken down from the WHO's website, it was cleansed or removed from the archives, so we couldn't even get it from the Wayback Machine.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Really. The day we had the kids case and we were standing there in court with it up on the screen in our opening, it was removed. Almost before your eyes.
So I remember similar with masks and their effectiveness and how they're used. I remember, again, on the podcast, reading it out, like reading it off my phone. This is what it is on their website. And then 2 or 3 days later, they had completely changed the wording of how that was. And so they tried to make it almost a bit more broad and vague in their terms. So, not uncommon.
No, and this is all politically based, these recommendations. They no longer are evidence-based. They've had evidence-based recommendations for years. Don't mask healthy people. August 2020, they changed that to allowing or encouraging the masking of healthy people, including children. In New Zealand and even in some states in Australia, children had to have breathing breaks at school because they were wearing masks. Breathing breaks.
So obviously very concerning. But to keep this on the topic of surveillance, how is that going to be implemented? What does that mean for like a podcast like ours, or just your general citizen walking around, what they can and can't say on social media, what they're looking at in regards to our private messages? How does this all unfold, and what's the fear when it comes to surveillance?
Well, this might be surveillance slightly of a different type than what you're thinking. So surveillance is going to have multiple different layers. But essentially we are concerned about the censorship that is being proposed under these documents, which Australia will have to implement on its citizens, and then surveillance, and then also the costs and control implications. From a surveillance perspective, we're going to see essentially tracking, testing and tracing of every aspect of our lives in lots of respects, because what the WHO is looking for is the next pathogen of pandemic potential. And they've got this great concept wrapped up, which is this thing that's called One Health, which sounds great, and Chloe will no doubt weigh in on this. One Health is this absolutely bonkers concept where the WHO is no longer interested in pandemics and looking after human health. They now want to capture the entire biosphere, from animals to the ecosystem, to ecology, to humans, everything. And they want to be able to capture that One Health concept, because they can then have endeavour to have complete control over Mother Nature, and it won't be just a case of recommending treatments for humans. It will also allow them to open up those recommendations for treatments for animals and all sorts. And of course, we wouldn't be a good old globalist organisation if we didn't have a bit of climate issues thrown in for good measure.
So is climate considered a health issue?
I believe under the definitions it still is, yes, because we've had a couple of versions of this document come out. So
what does that mean if they declare a climate crisis, of which they've been declaring for the last 50 years? If they're declaring a climate crisis, does that mean they can implement their own, I guess, measures in which we are not allowed to drive certain cars or whatever it is? That
could be the recommendations that flow.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a bit of a concern.
Sorry, Chloe.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think something, because we have an opportunity to kind of like dive a little bit into the weeds of it. It's because it all does. I suppose for me in this conversation, I'm like, I do want to undercut, because it does sound like a good idea when you just have that sentence of One Health, and you go, because I mean, we've had many conversations about like the ideas of unity consciousness, and we are all one being, and things are interconnected and symbiotic, and that sounds like an appealing idea, but obviously a lot of awful things can be brought in and under that guise. So what I would really love to get into, I guess, is particularly obviously, Katie, because you've read a lot of documents like this, is the way that they're defining the language and what that allows.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just bringing up the pandemic agreement here. And if you are interested to learn more about this, we have all of the documents available on the Aligned Council of Australia's website with brief explanations about all of these great topics that we're talking about today. So I'm just bringing up where the pandemic agreement, which is the document that the concept of One Health is really brought in and is going
Also
to see us have the whole
mention
thing tied up.
Yeah, and also
Sorry, Chloe.
while Katie's doing that, just important to mention that the One Health framework is another separate document that has been produced in collaboration with the World Bank as its primary funding source, I believe, and there's a couple of other partners in there. The interest that they have in agricultural practice is quite astounding, but we'll go into that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so One Health is a One Health approach to prevent pandemics and respond. It recognises that human health is closely linked and interdependent with the health of domestic and wild animals, as well as plants and the wider environment, including the ecosystem. And they are aiming for a sustainable balance and the use of integrated, multi-sectorial and transdisciplinary approaches to pandemic prevention, which the WHO is kindly going to manage for us.
So break that down for someone like me who's just going, okay, cool, I don't know.
It sounds like a word salad, doesn't it?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
I'm sure intentionally.
Oh, absolutely, by design.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So what does that mean, basically?
My rough and ready summary of it, and I keep getting particularly upset about this, and I'm waiting for other people to get as upset as I am, is they essentially want to be able to control the whole process. And they are looking for perpetual pandemics. The more pandemics, the more money that can be spent, the more recommendations for products that will get us out of the next pandemic that they've declared. So they want to have everything locked up. So if they can find a pathogen of pandemic potential, which we have to scour our countrysides for, including human sewage, bird flu testing, animal testing, bovine testing. I think we've got blood tests that are still being regularly taken by wild pigs here in Victoria. They want to be able to test and find every nasty. They then want to be able to send that, or require countries to send their pathogens or their nasty bugs to a World Health Organization laboratory, which is one situated in Germany. And then they will be able to provide the next solution for when that pathogen releases either naturally or accidentally through the lab, and then they get to declare the pandemic and make the recommendations which countries will buy. So it's almost like a perfect circular model, and that One Health allows them to not only have control over human pandemics, they can now capture everything. So everything that Mother Nature gives, they can then essentially grab hold of and say, right, we can check your bees, we can test your cows, we can check any wild pig. They really want to be able to have the whole lot within their control and their grasp for the benefit of what they say is human health, but really is the benefit of their investors.
Okay. So in regards to that then, what does that mean they can do? Like, is there a point where Australia could stand up and go, no, we're not going to listen to you?
Well, ideally, we would have done that in the past.
Correct.
When did ACA start? February of 2024. Ideally, like, having made a bit of a noise about it and having had the collective experience that we've had over the past 5-6 years, you would think that we would be making a much bigger noise about it than we are.
I mean more like the government itself, for example. If we've signed into this, and let's give them, for devil's advocate, a bit of a backbone, and they realise, no, what you're suggesting, it's going to fuck our economy, or it's not in our best interest. We don't believe that's the right thing to do. Are they still allowed to go, no, we're not listening?
Well, I think
technically,
the thing that is concerning to me about it is this kind of homogenisation of process. So when Katie's talking about that circle, do I think that that's going to affect certain agricultural partners, like within that industry, who have aligned themselves with this side of things, or do I feel that perhaps it may be used to, like, for smaller family farms? So the idea of that circle for me is just market creation, and then this is why this is such a dense topic, and we have to kind of separate it in these ways, is because we're having to unpack, well, okay, so if we're identifying a pathogen and we're storing it, then perhaps there's testing that can be done on that, or whether it's enhanced. Again, Katie, I will have to check in with you in regards to the gain of function research. Is that still in there? Has that been walked back?
That was removed. That was only in there in one draft and was quickly removed. And this is the thing, they've put a lot of different things and wish lists in, but then realised that they bring quite a bit of agitation to them. So the World Health Organization's offer to regulate gain of function research, was mentioned in an earlier draft of the pandemic agreement, yet realising that it was a topic that agitated quite a lot of people, they just removed that. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to encourage it. It just means that no longer are the words in the agreement.
Certainly, and so we can look at it. We can look at it from that one circle of pandemic response and medical products that are required to conduct that, and sending them all around the world, and it's more is needed here and less is needed there. But it does have this domino effect into other industries, and like the big thing for One Health, for me, as someone who really respects food of a high integrity, is that we're going to have, I feel, under this framework, there's going to be a lot more incidences of attacks on food safety, and so culling of certain herds. Yes, there's a cost effect of that, but I just assume that the partnerships that have been formed now that are implementing this framework will continue as they did during COVID to protect their friends and the ones that they're aligned with, and the people that will be pushed to the brink in terms of not having an income, not having accessibility to food, will be the majority of the general public. Which is that's always been the thing that kind of lights a fire at the base of my spine, because obviously I'm someone who values independence and sovereignty, and I believe in independent food. So that's, for me, that's where the surveillance one kind of grinds my gears.
And that's so right. It's going to impact likely the ability to hunt for food, to possibly even grow your own food. It's not an accident that they want you to register your chickens and any livestock that you have. None of that is by accident. It is all part of this attempt for global control of every aspect of the biosphere, so that they've got that locked down.
Now, who's pushing for this? I see. Is it Tedros? What's his name? Tedros?
Dr. Tedros.
Yeah, Dr. Tedros.
Now, he's obviously the face of it all. But what's pushing for this? Why is there an idea for this to happen? What's the I guess the everything happens under the guise of a good idea. What's the actual good side of this that they're suggesting? Is what's the benefit of this if we were to join?
I mean, that's the joke about it, isn't it? We were so terribly prepared for the last one. We did such a bad job. We have to do a better one this time round. So we don't know when that is, but we have a fair idea.
So that's what they're saying, is like, we did a poor job. We didn't get enough people vaccinated, so we need to do a better job. Is that it, basically?
Yeah, well, if you're asking about who's pushing this, and generally the comment is if we know their name, they're not the ones pushing it, but there are certainly a couple that are the sliding soldiers that are out in front. So Director General Tedros has some questionable backgrounds, and certainly, isn't a doctor, even though he has got some sort of public health background. His appointment, extremely questionable. Is he the suitable person for the job if this is a World Health Organization that is simply here to advise? And you've got to keep in mind that this is no longer an organisation that's there to be for health or to advise. It really is taking a different angle now, and it's starting to, force itself into countries and decision making, and so that's that concept of sovereignty where we're losing that. I've just been on an interview panel with a woman who was working with the WHO, and she actually said that in 2009 Bill Gates turned up at the World Health Organization and said, well, through my organizations, Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation and Gavi. We are paying more than most countries in contributions, so I should really have a seat at the table and, let me just build my building next to the World Health Organization's building in Geneva, and I'll just have a whole building full of Gavi people, and lo and behold, we'll be at the same restaurants and living the same life in Geneva. And by the way, I really want to have a seat at the table, so I should be on the executive. And I've got a slight interest, which is, to push my vaccine products because, that's my business interest, even though I carry on that I'm a philanthropist. So there's definitely aspects of that. Gates is one of the most obvious that you can see. Gavi's involvement in payments to the WHO is obvious. And this is where really the WHO changed. The WHO has started to become top-heavy, like we've got with most governments, way too many bureaucrats. And they've getting, I'd call it bureaucratic bloat, where there's so many of them, they need to all justify their existence. And consequently, we've got private organisations that are paying money into an organisation that is led by member states. There should only be member state contributions, nothing else. We do not need private investment in the World Health Organization, because private investment comes with a hook. And that hook is to feather the nest of the private investment. So they're creating this perfect storm, and they're infiltrating the World Health Organization. They're making more and more bureaucrats. There used to be only a handful of public health physicians in the world. Now there's entire courses at most universities, and it's a huge industry, and they need to keep themselves employed.
So I
how
definitely
do you do that? Another pandemic.
I certainly agree with the privatised donations. That needs to. Transparency doesn't seem to be enough. Like, yes, we can see that Bill Gates might donate, but that doesn't change anything. Like, and having the conflict of interest of like he gets to make, if he's on the board or if he's an executive or part of that decision making, that also benefits his product that he's selling and pushing and profiting from. There's a conflict of interest. Now we can all see it, but for whatever reason that. We're just meant to trust that, oh, no, I'll make these decisions not based on my profits and my interest. I'll make that based on the best interest of the world and the health. Well, I guess to play devil's advocate, why can't we trust Bill Gates to do that? Like, just to play devil's advocate.
I just don't think that you can have anyone involved in the executive that also benefits from the solution.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's really it, just follow the money. Money is greed. Greed is the biggest downfall of a lot of the issues that we've got and we face nowadays. And this infiltration that they've got is huge. 25% of the WHO's funding now comes from private organisations.
Wow.
That's a quarter. That is absolutely ginormous.
That's absurd.
And I would say on trust, like, play devil's advocate and say, well, why can't we trust them? Well, why can't this body of member states trust themselves and the member states that are a part of it? Why is there this pull for the centralisation of those decisions? Because it's the Director General of the WHO that gets to declare the pandemic in that scenario, right? That becomes one person. There's no vote.
Yeah, that's concerning. And
so how can we can't assume good intent at that level of centralisation, because it's too easy to corrupt one person.
And also, I guess another concern from my point of view is I think I've seen China just pledged $500 million to the World Health Organization. Is that correct? I think it was.
That's 5 times more than what Penny Wong just gave them in August 2023.
So if China itself is a communist state that we don't trust, but they're the ones who are paying this organisation and probably a vast majority of their funding because America's pulled out all their money, that seems an interesting
business
dynamic. Yeah,
that is. Yes, that was announced on the 1st of June, 500 million over 5 years. And look, there are various payments. So there's assessed contributions, which all the countries have agreed to pay an extra 20% on the assessed contributions, and then there are these voluntary contributions, which Penny Wong gave 100 million to the WHO in August 2023, really unsure for what. And then China's pledge looks like it's going to be another voluntary contribution on top of the assessed amounts. Now, one of the reasons why the United States just said that it was leaving and has filed an executive order leaving the WHO was on the basis that it was paying so much more on assessed contributions than China. So the fact that China's now offered this 500 million is very interesting. But it is a real concern that the United States has left Argentina and making similar noises for leaving. And, you know, when there's gaps made, someone will fill that gap, and here clearly China's filling that $600 million gap that the US has left, and it will no doubt come with hooks.
Now, I've noticed, and my details could be broad, so correct me if I'm incorrect, if I'm wrong. New Zealand's backflip and their role in this, kind of interesting, because under Jacinda Ardern, rolled over even easier than Australia. They were just as big a police state. We were pussies. That's what we were. We rolled over and took it, and even if we didn't, our government was very strong-handed, firing rubber bullets at our citizens for protesting, and which is quite ironic because they're very upset about that happening now in America. But New Zealand was one of those countries that was probably even more tyrannical than ours, and the backflip to just not even be involved now. I mean, that's great to hear. Is that something that we could possibly see here? Like, who do we need to remove from this decision making? Because that's quite inspiring that New Zealand can have that backflip.
Yeah, so New Zealand's backflip, I guess, is a partial backflip. It's entirely political. We had the Labour government, and then we lobbied extremely hard in New Zealand for the new coalition to ensure that they rejected a version of the regulations, and that they conducted significant analysis on the regulations and pandemic treaty, which is still happening at the moment. They haven't made a total decision, but they have said that there is a national interest assessment which would be done automatically. It just depends who's writing it. But then also that there'll be no, if there's any whiff of an impact on sovereignty, then the documents are out. Now, that's simply political. That got them votes. They're doing it for votes. They want, the whole reason why we have a Phase 2 Royal Commission going through New Zealand at the moment is because government wishes to the current government, New Zealand First and National and ACT, essentially want to dine out on the Labour's entrails for the next 10 years, or at least 2 election cycles. They don't really care about the outcome of COVID or the Royal Commission. They just want to see Labour never get back in. That's a little bit different from the situation in Australia because of the various, it was really split as to which party was in power in each of the states. A lot of the recommendations that the WHO were making were being implemented at state level, not at federal level. And so you've got this real conflict. You've got Albanese promising a royal commission before he got in last time, and then, coming up with this essentially 3-page reply document that you could do. It was such a whitewash of any sort of inquiry, and it's just super inconvenient to them. They do not wish to have it analysed in any way whatsoever, and you've got, I think, a uni party, which both of them are very keen for more and more control. Yeah,
this was my concern when we had Basil on, and I knew he was going to be a bit of a wordsmith. He's very good at what he does. He is very good at what he does. And there's a couple of times within the conversations that I noticed that he didn't answer, he gave an answer without answering, but I definitely felt he gave the nice, I understand what you were feeling in that time through the COVID questions, but he didn't push back and say, no, I'm going to push against that the next time if that was to happen. He wasn't along those. So what I have noticed specifically, and that's an isolated case, but it's also a good example of Liberal and Labor in this country, both just being the same and they're answering to the same people. I even noticed it with the mining. There was a good example was he had a chance to say something about the Northwest Shelf, and they align with it. And this, he gave a bit of a scattered answer where he's saying we'll probably scare them away if we charge them too much tax and too many royalties. And again,
a great fit for a politician.
Exactly, and it ends up being whoever it is they're either going to vocally oppose something just for the sake of it, just for the view of it, or they're going to be exactly the same. Either way, the people who oppose are probably, for the view of it and how they're perceived and perception and votes, they're still going to undercut us. I think behind the scenes, they're still going to go down the same path.
Absolutely, and I think that that's a very real and realistic view of it. I think that if it wasn't for New Zealand First in New Zealand, the National would be lapping up the COVID response and running headlong into the next pandemic treaties because it's great. And whoever's scratching their back is, scratching it really nicely because they too wish to see greater control and thought COVID was a great idea.
Now, do you I see all of these situations, and we talked about this before, with problem, reaction, solution. And you can argue whether or not these are orchestrated and the problems put in place intentionally, but these things do happen. There could be a release of a disease or something. And my fear is now, having had happen what did happen, and the way it was handled and the way the power was abused, and it was leveraged to benefit a small amount of people, will then, in the future, when we do have something that is potentially very dangerous and harmful, we're going to have people push back. I'd be one of those people. I'd be like, nah, I'm not doing it, and I'd vocally oppose. Well, depending on what science was presented, if I see it's not. But you get what I'm saying? It's created this very dangerous cocktail where if there's a real pandemic and a real emergency, we don't know what to believe.
Yeah, well, it is a cry wolf situation, isn't it? If they've made such a botch up of it this time, a whole lot of people were very unimpressed about how it was handled. We're all a lot poorer for it. We're certainly all a lot sicker for it. Are we going to run headlong into it? The mainstream media has done a terrible job. The mainstream media was there to keep the government honest and the responses honest, and to actually support people. And look at what's happened to the trust in mainstream media. It's absolutely plummeted because you can no longer support or believe what the Fourth Estate has to say. It really has been captured in the same way that the WHO's been captured, and a lot of other places have been captured. We've got that real global push, and it undermines any future real pandemic. I think it's a real problem, and certainly, but we also need people to be asking questions, don't we? So if you're realistically asking questions, hopefully some people have learnt to ask those after last time.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, I think, and I was going, I don't even feel like I should say that because we're talking about these governments, but it has just caused such a lack of faith and trust in them that now it is, like you said, that that you would push back. And in my head, I'm going, everything is risk-benefit analysis. Mm-hmm. We aren't afforded the luxury of handing a decision over to anyone, particularly not a government anymore, because they do it so incorrectly and so harmfully. That's what the past 5-6 years has left with me, and that's what terrifies me about this, because it's that terrible management on a microscopic level. Yeah,
they fucked their response so badly last time. How could we ever trust them again? I mean,
well, or perhaps it is this thing that Katie said of just following the money, and of course we're going to talk about that another time. But
but by having open dialogue, that was crushed.
But that's what I mean. In terms of following the money, they carried out an incredibly successful operation.
Oh yeah.
So I think we should also be looking at where it is succeeding
to utilise it ourselves.
Well, no, not in that way. No, but just I think because a lot of people get blinders on, or they don't want to hear it when you say, like, look at all of the mistakes that they've made.
Yeah.
Whereas I always feel it kind of lights a fire in someone where you're like, well, look what they got away with. Like, oh, look at the benefit over there. You're the one who's left.
So
like,
now
let's focus less on how all the mistakes we made. They got away scot-free.
You mentioned it's been captured, and I assume by donations and people like Bill Gates. Penny Wong, who, like, for people at home don't know who that is, and Garvey, because those were two names that I'm not hugely familiar with, so maybe talk about them as well.
Sure. So Penny Wong is Australia's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade. She is responsible for international treaties that come down to financial arrangements, or in this case, the pandemic agreement, which is a large financial arrangement with respect to establishing frameworks inside our country to ensure that we're giving a percentage of our vaccines that we can now manufacture in Melbourne at the Moderna factory. She then becomes the minister responsible for that agreement, separate from Mark Butler, who's the Minister of Health, and he's responsible for the pandemic regulations. So Penny Wong has been our Minister of Health for the last at least 3 years, and obviously with Labor getting in again, it's anticipated that she will continue in that role. And she, over her time, has given significant money to the World Health Organization in these voluntary contributions.
On behalf of Australia, or her own personal contributions?
No, on behalf of Australia.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
I don't think she asked us.
I guess the argument in that response is like, well, she's been voted in. Well, her party has been voted into this position, and they've put her in to make these decisions on our behalf. So I get that she doesn't have to seek our permission, but it does seem like that's something that should be at least examined.
You would think so, especially because it's $100 million, and it's very little information is given on what it's for, other than it's a voluntary payment to the World Health Organization to support global efforts to prevent, prepare and respond to pandemics. Remember, the last major pandemic was 1918 with the Spanish flu, and the funding is going to go to things such as $75 million to core funding over 5 years, and a further $25 million to the Health Emergencies Program.
Especially when we have such issues at home with our own healthcare system. Like, I know Perth is obviously it's isolated, but it's we've had our ramping issues and healthcare system issues, and I'm not ever going to complain about our healthcare system because compared to any other country, it's fucking incredible. But there is money that we could be better spent at home as opposed to the World Health Organization, which brings me to USA. Trump pulled out of the World Health Organization and their funding. Why did he do that?
Look, I think he's probably, he mentioned it in his last term that he was going to get out of it. And now that he's in his second term, he's definitely got out of it. I think it was one of the executive orders he gave on the first day. And, he is not, I don't know the inner workings of Trump and the like, but I do follow US politics quite closely as a US citizen. And so I do, the comments made were about financial, about it being no longer the organisation that it used to be, and that it did an appalling job during COVID. So it shouldn't really be going and creating some new pandemic treaties for the benefit of being able to repeat COVID again very quickly. So they're the comments coming out of the US. The US and certainly Robert Kennedy Jr. made comments and gave feedback on the US's exit from the WHO. Last week or the week before, and they're saying that it's not that they don't have a focus on public health, they just don't think it should be being managed by an organisation such as the World Health Organization, and they're looking at doing something different. And does it need $30 billion a year for pandemic response when the risk of pandemics is low, and that money could be dedicated to improving sanitation and, say, antibiotics in a particular location where, pathogens of pandemic potential may cause a pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, common sense then.
Common sense.
That's strange.
Pretty much.
It's very rare that we hear common sense in politics.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying Trump has common sense. He's a bit all over the joint. But, it seems quite rational to do that. And focusing on yourself, which is the concern about this One Health thing, where you don't get to make decisions based on your own population's health. We're all different. We're all like, it makes sense that each country should make decisions based on their country's best interest.
Absolutely, Branchy. And the other thing is that we should be able to make individual decisions on our own health with all the right information. So what's happened is it seems to be that it's gone topsy-turvy. We've got this global response and treating everybody the same in the interests of equity and solidarity, which are the new catchphrases at the WHO, no one's safe until everyone's safe. Whereas, we've got a good health system, a much better health system in Australia than many other countries. This money is just going to be diverting it away from real issues that we've got, real health issues that we've got in our own country for the benefit of a possibility of something that may or may not happen. And the focus is rules and regulations for everybody that are the same. You might have a different need to somebody else, but you need to make that decision on your own, not being mandated, not being told that this is what has to happen, not being locked up in your home when you're perfectly healthy, and not being given all of the information as to what is the real risk to you and what is the benefit to you and what are the options.
Well, like a perfect example, and we keep using Perth as an example, but that's all I have as my...
We're a special place.
Yes, we are isolated, so we have we actually have a pretty good way of looking at things. But a perfect example is that Perth is the way it was handled in regards to... Oh, fuck, I completely lost my train of thought.
Are you trying to talk about that we're one of the isolated case studies where the vaccine was introduced prior to majority spread? Is that
no, that's not what I was going to go down, but that is a very valid point.
Yeah.
What were you talking about prior to that? Because
we're talking about a global approach to to a response as opposed to an individual choice.
Yeah, I can't remember where I was going with that, but yes, I cannot remember, but
that's all right. I might take it in a different direction because I'm curious in terms of, so July 19 comes around, Australia continues its bullish way forward and says yes, what life looks like come September. So in terms of the surveillance, how is that being reported to the WHO? So is there already a pre-existing body in Australia? Are we looking at another panel of people? Hubs in capital cities or agricultural areas? Like what does it look like physically, this infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's break down what surveillance looks like. So surveillance looks like the electrifying of medical records. So yours, mine, everybody's. Surveillance looks like the testing of sewage to see whether or not there's any loogies in there. And essentially all sewage systems had installed during the time of COVID testing systems to allow them to test. So did you notice in the sort of last years of COVID, there was all of a sudden, we can identify an outbreak in this area because someone's a sewage facility is tested positive. That really started to flow through in 2022. Surveillance also looks like testing people, testing animals. We've seen recently the shutting down of bees, for example, in New South Wales, bee farms. Also, the shutting down of chicken farms, particularly in Victoria, for bird flu, which, we've always had bird flu. It's just now we can test for it, and lo and behold, when you test, you find. And that really is the benefit of this surveillance. So they're surveilling everything. And then there is a situation where the WHO requires all of that genomic information, all those pathogens, to be shared with the WHO. There will have to be a organisation under the regulations that is established called the National Implementation of the Regulations Authority. That authority is within Australia and has to report back to the WHO that we're complying with all of the requirements that we have now signed up to. And so they are going to be able to conduct that surveillance, that testing. That's just the testing. Then we've got the tracking so that we can see where people are going and see where people are moving. And then we've got the tracing so that they can then contact people to say, oh, well, you've come into or been exposed by this situation, so, we need to either shut you down, quarantine you, put you in a camp. And that's really the worst of it.
Feels like the recent COVID lockdowns and those sorts of things. It's almost like they were testing ways of doing this and failed. But obviously seen where they did fail to get people on board. And I guess that's the fear, is that they will convince everyone that this is required.
Well, and I think...
or not even actually convince. You won't have a choice. And
another level of it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, but in terms of the electronified health records, I opted out. I never went for it. They tried to push the campaign here. I was like, nah, paper, have all my testing at home, thanks. But in terms of that, so if we submit, so I submit for testing, I've flagged something, that data and sample is then sent to the WHO. Do they know that it's me, or is this just in our population testing?
Could be. Look, we don't know. Let's take a more recent example. If you ever had a PCR test, where did your results go? If you had a PCR test for COVID, where did your results go? Who received them? Did they go to a collaboration centre? And this is what the WHO's also been busy working on since 2018, 2019, is to create relationships within organisations already established within Australia and other countries, such that they have collaboration centres now. So, for example, APRA is a collaboration centre of the WHO. Most universities are collaboration centres of the WHO. TGA is a collaboration centre of the WHO. So
all bodies with impeccable records.
Oh, absolutely. I would give them a hedgehog to look after.
Yeah.
This is what the problem is that there is the desensitising of private information. There is the running roughshod over individual rights and the right to choose. There is the insertion of political pressure within relationships that should never have political pressure, such as the doctor-patient relationship. And there is this dumbing down of people such that they can't make decisions for themselves anymore.
So do you think at its core that they're making these decisions based on what they do believe is in our best interest? Or do you think there's something a little more, I don't want to say sinister because that feels very conspiratorial, but do you feel like the people who are donating, who are making decisions and influencing the decisions made, are trying to benefit just their profiteering?
I think that there are no doubt very good people at the WHO that have done public health with the benefit of doing public health. And they believe that they're doing the right thing, and they believe that what they're doing is great, and they've caught all the catchphrases. And they've gone to university at that time where, they've been perhaps given a more, communalistic concept of greater good and all of those concepts, and we live in a world that's falling apart. We need to bring it back together, and the only thing we can do is collective health, collective responsibility, and do something for your nation. So I do think that there are good people that think that they're doing great things, but I do think that they're captured. I think that they're capturing is the same problem as we can see with the environmentalism and the environmental climate change movement. It is essentially a religion that gets captured and is being captured, and a lot of people get into it, and then they're like, well, this is nothing like what I thought it was going to be, and there's something much more sinister. Exactly.
Unknowingly captured. That's I mean, that's manipulation, and that's also, I guess that's also having an influence on the teaching medicine and even earlier than that. So as they're doing university, if the information they're given when they're learning these things is, if that information has been, I don't want to say leveraged, but it's...
I mean, we can
use the word leveraged.
We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
There has been a takeover of allopathic medicine that was underpinning an entire industry's waste products. You know, like that's another example of that kind of market creation. And if you're intercepting at that point of education, you have people operating under what they think is the best interest for their patients, and they're going to defend that because they're wanting to look after people. So many people go into those roles.
Yeah.
To caregive and nurture.
Yeah, because you can't. I mean, I never get angry or upset with doctors at all because they're obviously they're only doing what they know. But a perfect example. Here's a perfect example of doctors in being educated in their fields or their areas. Is I went to get some skin checks. I got some things burned off my face and whatnot. He also found some dermatitis that every time I'm in Australia, which is 90% of the time in Perth, my face breaks out in like just red, patchy, scaly spots. Anyway, I just said, look, what's the cause? How can we get rid of it? And he's like, we don't know what causes it. Like, could be any number of things. Yeah. He's like, well, here's this cream. Use it for 6 weeks. Should go away. It'll probably come back every 6 months or so, but just use this cream for 6 weeks. And I was like, okay, cool. But I don't want to just mask the symptoms. I want to fix it. I want to avoid what's causing it, or I want to heal it. And he said, well, I don't know. Like, it'll take a lot to try and figure it out. But here's this cream. That's all he did. And he's got a lot of people he has to sort. So I guess that comes into play. He's a general practitioner, and he just doesn't have the knowledge nutritionally what might be causing it. He did suggest it's stress and potentially some sort of dietary things could be exacerbating it, but he doesn't know. So have this cream. And this is what we see with any sort of sickness or ailment. It's like, here's a mask. Don't worry about treating the cause. Don't worry about avoiding what's triggering the response. Just have this, and you should be able to keep living your life as normal. And
I guess that's a byproduct of living in an industrial age, and it's this continual example of those people aren't given the time. You're not treated as an individual. You're treated as a patient, and I just need to dispense one thing, and then you're out of here.
Yeah.
It's applying that same thing.
It's corporatizing our health.
Education. Well, look, with these two treaties, that's what we're doing. We're not humans anymore, are we? Because there's a very this is testing my memory. There's a very interesting wording there of that. It's a person, and I think this is in like One Health. And the way that the sentence reads, it's in the opening abstract or introduction. It reads as though they're referring to like a 100 billion part person, or it's like a person's health. Or what is a person? Is it an individual, or under this framework, is it the ecosystem? So if I'm, classic Chloe, agitating over here and sticking to my holistic remedies and not complying, am I the bit that needs to be erased from the 100 billion part person to keep its health? Like that's the way that it reads.
This is the thing about health. We are all individuals. Like my allergies might be different to your allergies, or the way I handle something might be completely different to another. So by treating us all as the same thing and having the same response, the same medications, whatever, that's only going to lead to what we've already seen. And my mum, and I've talked about it a fair few times on the podcast, my mum's the perfect example. Like 90% of people who had the COVID jab are probably fine, and maybe.
Numbers are skewed on that branch.
I'm going to be optimistic that they're going to be fine. Let's say 90% of them are going to be fine.
It's all give them that luxury.
Yeah, and there's not going to be any long-term things or any chronic ailments in the future. But there were people who were they had predispositions that they didn't know about that were going to make them more susceptible to certain things. My mum, perfect example, didn't realise she had a susceptibility to blood clots, had the jab, and it caused blood clots in her gut and her lungs, and nearly killed her. She had to, I think it was like 12 to 18 months in and out of hospitals, 2 operations. 2 times I had to say goodbye to my mum over the phone because she was stuck in Thailand trying to have that conversation to hope, like, they weren't giving her much of a chance to get through the operation, these sorts of things. But regardless, the point is that she didn't know she had a predisposition to blood clotting, because why would you? You don't know. You don't go get these tests. And they mandated this drug for everyone, but they didn't mandate you go and get genetic testing. And this is like my concern with anything like that. When you treat everyone as the same, that's the problem you're going to have. And they'll say, well, the greater good. Look how many people we saved. Cool. Look how many people you killed as well. Why can't you do both? There's no reason you can't do both by maybe taking a little bit more time. And, maybe sometimes it is. I think there would be benefits to vaccines if we can do them properly. But are they ever going to prioritise health and the well-being of everyone over the profits? I don't think so, because they are, at the end of the day, a business that benefits from people being sick.
I've always said if a vaccine proves to be safe and effective, I will be first in line. But I am the only one that gets to make that decision for me.
Correct. You get to make the choice. That's exactly right.
Okay. On surveillance, we're now kind of surveying these people and watching their moves and what they're doing.
Watching the watches.
Watching the watches. So we've got July 19th as our date to reject, assuming that goes through, kicking off from September. Are there any other deadlines that we need to be aware of, or those are our 2 big ones at the moment?
Yeah, so the 19th of July, we need to ensure Mark Butler rejects the pandemic regulations, otherwise we're going to see more censorship, which I think you're going to have a session on. Surveillance, which we've touched on today, and just what that might look like, and digital IDs, vaccine passes, your rights being taken away if you don't do what you're told. And then that has to be implemented by 19th of July. But let me be clear, the regulations will be implemented, but it's when things are declared that really things will kick off. But in the meantime, in the background, there'll be this surveillance that has to be established, and they'll be tracking and they'll be testing and they'll be looking, and that doesn't stop because just because a pandemic hasn't been declared or a fake hasn't been declared. It will still be, this is the problem with these regulations, is that this is establishing an ongoing surveillance system that will be up and running. The Ministry of Health or Department of Health here is very excited about electrified medical records so that they can see what's going on and be able to share any information that looks to be of interest. And it seems that there's more interest in the surveillance side of things than actually doing that personal care.
So the one argument I always hear is like, well, who cares if they got your information? Because if you're not doing anything wrong, what does it matter? And I hear that all the time. Now, yes, that's a valid point to a point, but there's also the point of like, wow, what point does it get to a time where they're mandating some sort of medication that you don't want to have, don't need, like we just had, and then you say, oh no, I'm not going to do that, and then they have every part of you under surveillance. They know what you're doing. They can stop you from going places. They can shut off banks, incomes, whatever. That's the concern, I guess, from my point of view, because people will say, they'd never do that. Well, they already did.
Yes.
So why wouldn't they do it again? Oh, we learn from our mistakes. Clearly, I don't think you guys ever learn from your mistakes. I don't think we've seen any evidence of that before.
It's just a continuing to exert will over other people. If people are concerned about some of the things that they've heard today or some of the things that they're seeing, where can they go and what can they do? Because we talk a lot about the solutions as well.
We're all about the solutions.
We are all about,
because there is actually solutions. There is, the power of no is huge. And, I think that there has been a lot of people that have a very different view of the world after COVID that might feel a bit more comfortable standing up and saying no. But again, we're also we do have a herd mentality. We feel much more comfortable being a part of a group, and we haven't even got on to the psychological techniques of COVID and the shaming and the like. But as a group, we've pulled together the Aligned Council of Australia. We've got represent the interests of 2 million Australians that are all concerned about the World Health Organisation. We've got multiple groups that, from health all the way through to rights-based advocacy groups. We have a huge group of people. We've got media backing and support, and we are there to ensure that people are informed about this, because how many people do you think that you ask on the street or at the supermarket or in your Uber, who I think is a new confessional, quite frankly, if they even know about the WHO pandemic treaties, and then if they don't, where do you find out information to be able to share that? Well, fortunately, we've pulled together some great resources on the Aligned Council of Australia website. It highlights all of the groups that we work with, and we are really about informing the public and educating the politicians, because I cannot tell you how many politicians we've met with and they have no idea about this. And that when you start drilling down some of your concerns, they then get concerned. So, that's how we get information to the politicians. We do need to educate them because they don't have a clue. And then we bring everyone else along from the ride, because we are much more fun than the other side, quite frankly.
Yeah. What role does, or not what role, but like what part, the childhood vaccine schedule, would that then come into consideration with regards to this treaty?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yuck. That's the part I don't want to think about, Katie.
You can handle that one, Chloe.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, that they will have complete influence over the childhood schedule and what is added. I would say remove, but they're yet to do that. So we will see an accumulation of vaccines that are required for everyone. And as you and I have discussed multiple times before, that's kind of the original mandate. You don't follow it and you're excluded from certain parts of society / schooling and daycare.
Yes.
And I'm sure that will only be taken to more and more extremes. I mean, I was left surprised, slightly pleasantly, that we didn't see the COVID shot be mandated in schools.
Well, it's been reversed almost, hasn't it? Now they're not recommending it.
No, but it was never a requirement for children to attend.
Oh, yes.
As in, like, if your child wasn't vaccinated with COVID, they weren't banned from coming to school.
Oh, yeah. Wouldn't have surprised me if they went to
or
that.
Daycare or any of those instances. And so for this, with the treaties and the issues we've had over the past 5 years, it's really just the play on that fear. And it does terrify me, the formalization of that framework, that it won't be questioned, because that's why this is the perfect time to do this, is because we still do have, although we've all moved on, we still do have these base level anxieties associated with what we all went through. So yes, that's the solution. Okay, we'll accept that.
Yeah. I'm interested, did the World Health Organization, did they recommend lockdowns? Did they recommend mandatory vaccination from their point of view? Do we know that?
They were very cautious with what they did do. So prior to COVID, they had all these evidence-based recommendations. Don't lock down. Don't lock down schools, don't lock down businesses, only for a short period of time in extreme circumstances, so the grades of pandemics.
Yes.
Don't mask healthy people. After they announced COVID as a FAKE, which is a terrible acronym, I know, but essentially a public health emergency of international concern.
PHEIC, for those who are listening.
What was it?
So the acronym is PHEIC, but phonetically you'd read it as fake.
Fake. Oh my God, they're fake.
Yeah, someone did not read that one out loud twice before determining it as an acronym. And so there is clear lines after delineation, and I just presented on this in the Royal Commission in New Zealand last week, was the change in recommendations. So they did say, locking down countries, okay, yes, possibly only for a short time, which of course our countries took to mean carte blanche and rolled with it and took it to 2 years in the case of New Zealand. Locking down schools, oh yes, only perhaps do it, yes, maybe the risk doesn't need to be so high to shut down the economy or shut down children's education. So they definitely lowered, and their recommendations noticeably changed after they declared the COVID a public health emergency. And those recommendations didn't change because of evidence. They didn't change because the respiratory illness changed, or that COVID was different from influenza. They changed it just because of the political pressure that they were under, that they were needing from countries to support them in their recommendations and to follow through. So a perfect storm.
So that's where more I'm getting, I guess, not confused. So was it the countries and the people at the top in the countries or the member states that made the decisions that they made, or was it the World Health Organization giving them the recommendations and they acted on that, or a bit of a combo of both?
Probably a bit of combo of both. The World Health Organization had a clear mandate: never use fear on your population. We saw fear.
Back to 2013, because I was doing some no jab, no pay research, and there was a vaccine committee in 2013 that was a WHO vaccine committee that said the best thing we can do is educate our public. There shouldn't be a need or feeling of pressure that they have to comply.
Yeah.
We want people to be healthy and empowered.
No need for coercion. So yes, you're absolutely right. The WHO made the recommendations, or else you can suggest, loaded the gun, and our countries fired the bullet. And so this is where they always play around with semantics of, there's no sovereignty concerns or issues with the WHO. We're not going to implement or force ourselves on countries. But we've got these sycophant political leaders such as Mark Butler who will turn around and say, no, these are the recommendations we're getting. We better follow them wholesale without question. Never mind that we've got our own pandemic plan. We just will throw that out because the WHO, their recommendations are so much better.
That's quite concerning to me. But I mean, a lot has been concerning to me over the last 3 or 4 years. What's the move going forward then from our end? What can we do as people to help, I guess, push against something like this? Mark Butler from signing, is that a possibility, or is he's just going to do whatever he wants no matter what we say?
Look, the annoying thing is with this rejection in the 19th of July is silence is acceptance. So we need to get them to positively act. We've got a number of resources that are available, a number of campaigns which Chloe will be able to touch on. But the biggest thing is about informing the public. At the end of the day, it's the compliance or the consent or the coercion that we need to be aware of, we need to be cognizant of, and we need to actually see it for what it is. And so, talking to people about it, we're not censored yet. You can't stop a conversation happening between two people, but, just ask a question, and ask a question if someone knows what's coming up, because these documents will lead to perpetual pandemics. It's a massive industry. There is, companies and organisations that are just desperate to see it run, because there is a huge financial windfall for them.
What's the concern with, I guess, potentially another pandemic coming in? What's the scare? What's the biggest concern of what they will implement and how they'll use that surveillance to their advantage?
Well, I think it's pretty much guaranteed that it would be a zoonotic spillover first and foremost. I mean, obviously they've got the ability to pick anything, but I think in terms of cementing the framework of One Health, we would be looking at control over like our animal and livestock. So I would say a disease spilling over from an agricultural industry is quite likely.
Hurt our local farmers mostly, as opposed to the corporate farms.
I mean, we can hypothesize on that, but yeah, I would say with the surveillance that's written down, most of those farms are, if in terms of One Health, I believe there's a lot written about livestock and their proximity to each other and their proximity to where you're living. And so if the choice is, well, we've got this incidence of disease outbreak and we need you to separate these different types of livestock by such and such a distance, or they need to be away from your house. If you haven't got the funds to change that infrastructure, because they're not going to pay for it.
Yeah.
There's nothing written in One Health that's like, oh, yeah, we want to better manage this and actually we're going to build you all new pens. It's at your own cost. So I think a lot of those smaller local farms are going to struggle if they're targeted, and we've seen over the past few years that they're being targeted just on incidents, like not even a pandemic or epidemic.
We're already seeing that, and I spoke to Simon Mulvaney yesterday. He's going to come on the podcast. He's from the Save the Bees.
Oh, fantastic.
Good.
Yeah, a lot of their content.
Yeah, and he's hopefully going to be in Perth, so we're going to sort that out in person as opposed to digital. But, his concerns are the fact that, and we don't even need a pandemic. They're already going in and just poisoning whatever they seem to deem appropriate. Like even the fact that it's being, this poison that they're using there is being used as a prophylactic, like a preventative. But it's well known and established, and even said in the use of this poison, whatever they're using, that this does not work in the case of a prophylactic. It cannot be used as a preventative. It doesn't work like that. Don't use it in like close to rainy days, those sorts of things. And they're just completely ignoring all of what their recommendations suggest.
Oh, I'm sensing a theme across some of the topics that we're discussing today.
But, so now that's the concern is they don't even have a pandemic treaty. They don't have any of these rules. So already they're doing this to our people and our citizens and our farmers and not only that, the wildlife, because the implications to the bird life, the bees, and this is for spraying for red fire ants that don't even exist. They're not on the properties. And people don't have a choice on what they're surrounding. Look, they've got pets on their properties. I've sprayed for pests and weeds and stuff on my properties. Sometimes I've used the wrong stuff. Yeah, no.
Properties
Property,
plural?
property. Yeah, as in houses I've lived in, and I've got animals. I've got dogs, and I've had to go. Fuck! I've used the wrong one. I can't let my dog out in the backyard for a couple of weeks. You know, like there's fucking heavy implications for putting poison around everywhere. And this is, I know, separate to COVID and a pandemic treaty, but it's an example of government overstepping and doing whatever they want without your permission.
Well, it is and it isn't. And I suppose that's also another kind of beautiful part of the treaties, Katie, and maybe you want to speak more to this, is just the level of domestic legislation. I mean, here in Australia, but obviously that spreads internationally too, in each their own, that already kind of has drafted the framework for us. And they all play hand in hand quite nicely, don't they?
They certainly do. And so it's that formulaic response that you guys have recognised with the bees, that we saw with the chickens. You know, it's an overlay that's happening to all of the domestic legislation, and really the pandemic treaties are really catching up and putting the rules into place at an international level. But we can see that our governments are readily writing the domestic legislation necessary to ensure our compliance. And it's very real. We can see it everywhere. The bees is a perfect example. The red fire ants is insane, and you know it's just a matter of time, you know, for something to kick off, and they'll want to have the solution available very quickly before they do recognise it as a fake or a pandemic, because you can sell the solution. And you know, treatment, do you then sort of mandate these poor farmers that they then need to vaccinate all their cattle and the like? You know, it's another huge windfall for companies, because lo and behold, you're not just vaccinating humans anymore, you've got all of these animals that you can now tap into for a financial return. Lo and behold, you then bankrupt the farmers, you lose farms, and that's also beneficial because then you've got more control over the food sources.
Yeah, it becomes factory, state-funded supply of your food, basically, then, doesn't it? And the quality of that food then obviously is less, because they don't look after their animals the way that family farms do. And I'm not suggesting there's not some horrific family farmers. I'm sure there's a couple around that are just fucking profit driven. But as a generalisation, a family farmer will prioritise the health and well-being of their animal because it is their product, it is their livelihood, and they need it healthy, strong, and they need to be supplying a good product or they don't compete. It's as simple as that. Whereas the factory farms, the corporatised farming just seems to be like it's a conveyor belt of like, let's get as much meat or crop out as possible, no matter what the quality.
Well, that's one of the things that I found a little funny, and it's just a little anecdotal because I was watching a couple of videos on One Health. There's like a little refresher, and there was a TED Talk from like 2015 or something. It was like the first one that came up. Go Google if you're listening. But it was a veterinarian, very established, had been dean of universities, and was talking about this idea of food security. But then the issues that he kept bringing up were related to big agricultural issues, that this manure was too close to this animal, which are not things you're going to see on pasture-raised animal farms. It's like not everyone's going to be packed in, not everyone's going to, like all the animals are going to have that level of antibiotics that their immune system's shot and then they're getting sick. So like it's almost, they're identifying the problem, but the solution that halts their operations isn't acceptable. Like we don't look at that.
Yeah.
We have to only look at the one that penalises like the animal itself or the smaller farm. Like, I found that I was going, that's an interesting idea. We're not questioning the human input.
So it's just another level of control, really.
Rather just the environment, yeah.
And that's not coming at it from any sort of conspiratorial avenue. That's just sort of saying what I'm saying is because this surveillance that we were in reference to, and yes, I probably came in with the wrong idea of surveillance just being about citizens and what they're doing and what sort of vaccination status they have or where they live and what their political views are. It goes far further than that. It goes into, what sort of, chickens you have and your livestock and how that's been treated, your crop. Has that been infected with something? And
look at
goes
also
way further.
Locally what we've dealt with in the past couple of years with that borer.
With what, sorry?
A borer. There's this teeny tiny little borer that they sampled at Hyde Park's the big site, and so now Hyde Park is losing 150 trees or something. They've got a massive.
What's a borer? Please explain.
Like it's like a tick. Like it's like a little.
Yeah. So that's
my explanation.
It's a little termite that eats wood.
Yes.
And it's like a termite. It's not a termite, but they're decimating all of those beautiful trees in that park. Just for the possible risk of it, rather than allowing the trees to form their own. Like this is the other insane thing about this is this denies immunity, and it doesn't allow immunity to occur naturally. So what they do is they just kill all the chickens or they cut down all the trees, whereas it's not allowing the tree or the chickens to actually create their own response. It's as if they've just ignored any sense of immunity. Immunity doesn't exist anymore. It certainly can't be created. They need to create it with a vaccine.
Well, yeah, so we can't build a more robust health as a human species or as a family or as a community if we're not encountering these things and our body's allowed to do its natural process. It's this kind of avoidance of mortality of like we can't have any symptoms, we can't experience anything. And I think that there's a concern too that will backflip. If we're even permitted, we talk particularly with vaccines, if we're not having exposure to a wild virus, then when we have exposure to a vaccine-derived virus, it's a lot worse of an illness, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's on a also grander scale because with these treaties and this framework and intercepting any time there's like the slightest difference, we're not exposing ourselves to these things on a micro level, and we may actually find that it festers separately over there because it's been removed from us, and then we're having that avalanche effect as well because we've seen that over the past 100 years.
No, nothing we've said today so far is really uncommon amongst the majority of people and their thoughts. And I find it interesting. There's quite a juxtaposition between the people who are making the decisions and what everyone else thinks. And it's like they just disregard our feelings and what we see and what we know and just treat us like we're dumb cattle that can be told to do whatever we want. I'm interested as to why we think there's such a juxtaposition. Do they think they know better and they're making these decisions on our behalf because we're just too dumb? We just don't get it. This is where it starts to feel conspiratorial, because you start to go, well, no, like they're not dumb either. Like me and you we can look at some data presented to us, even if you put it in basic form, just give us the truth and what we can see, and we'll make an educated decision based on what we see. But they don't do that, and it always seems to be at the prioritisation of profits and corporations as opposed to the people. I don't see that ever changing as well. Like I see it in Liberal and Labor with regards to their bids for being in government in Australia. Like Liberal, for example, their next run, they would win by a long way if they just went on this, we're going to prioritise people. We're going to stop prioritising corporations. We're going to actually listen to you and go, that Northwest Shelf is pretty bad. It's actually quite a contradiction in our thoughts on climate change. And, we're going to actually make sure we don't enforce these things. We're not going to sign up to the pandemic treaty. If you had the Liberal government suggest that, I'd think there'd be a massive swing in their favour. But none of them do. They just go, well, we'll just win and then we'll just be in power. And then it'll be the same thing. And then in another fucking 10 years, there'll be a switch. It'll go to Labor. And it's hard to not feel like it's just a grand conspiracy. And it sounds stupid, but that's what it feels like.
I know. I can't go into a big, long anthropological, sociological rant right now about the state of the human condition. But I think it's very human. I think it's very base level that when you get a little bit of money and power, it feels really, really nice, and you like to enjoy that. And if there's something that's getting in your way of attaining more of that, then you're either going to get rid of it or you're going to manage it as effectively as possible. And I feel it's like if the world is one big office block where, they're the HR department and they're just like, go and sit behind your computer, keep working, we've got you covered. Like, that's the level of consideration we have. And it's sad to say, I don't see that changing, but I don't either, unless there is a cultural shift. But Cameron Branch, it's a conversation for you and I another day, I think, because I could go on a long time. That's
definitely a long conversation based on what we've been talking about. But what do we do after Mark seems to sign this, which seems inevitable in my opinion? But but let's be optimistic. Let's assume we're going to make a difference. But we'll go down the other path. What do we do moving forward from there?
Well, the power of no is huge. The power of asking questions is huge. So, if the next pandemic is announced, you ask questions. You talk to your doctor about where your medical records are held. You make the decision not to sign up to MyGov. You make sure that you are resilient and not reliant on government. So you ensure that you are able to talk to people about these issues, not necessarily online so that you get censored. You take responsibility for yourself, but you also ensure that you have good community and you have the ability to say no. So that is incredibly important, because the ability to say no is really derived from how reliant you are on the government. And so the more resilient you are, I think the huge power that you have in being able to say no. And that's how we get rid of the bureaucratic bloat, because you talk about the politicians. Well, they are just the duck on the water and only care every 3 years. The bureaucratic machine that operates in underneath it, that meets with all the lobbyists, that gets more feedback and information and pressure on them, and gets offered the cushy job or the revolving door, even if it's going to sell out the country. That's where the issue is. Not the politicians are just blindly following along, probably don't have a full understanding of what they're signing up to or not signing up to. It just sounds like a great idea because they've been sold.
Yeah, interesting.
It feels like a call to arms isn't the right phrase, but it's that thing of those of us who went through the past 5 years, which is the majority of this listenership, I would still say.
Yep.
Are going to be called upon again to kind of be that little beacon in their local communities and to not have cynicism to the way things went last time or the way that they were treated last time. And to, sorry, just Katie, I thought that when you said, when the next pandemic is called, is like that's when we will be called to stand as we did before and bring those people in, because this is not, that COVID was a very medicalized production, and yes, it kind of bled into our day-to-day lives in terms of our interactions, but as we talk about this topic more and in the other conversations we have, it's impacting every aspect of our lives from wake to sleep very, very apparently and clearly. Well, it's like there. I
didn't think, and I've definitely, my eyes opened to it quite a lot more just by this conversation around the I guess the impact it could have on agriculture and specifically local family farmers, which seems to be like this coordinated effort to put every bit of our agriculture into corporations, again, privatised sponsors who probably benefit from both.
It's the tacky example. It's been said 1,000 times, but Bill still got his fake meat, bug meat company.
Yeah, Bill. Yeah.
There's a very apparent conflict of interest. It's not even we went out and we euthanized all these cows and chickens. It's like we had to protect you. We're so sorry. Here's the alternative.
Yeah, so it's even like a long-term thinking.
Well, yeah, it's just continuing that centralization of our food supply, the centralization of our medical system and data, and it's all going to this one place. And this one person, I cannot stress enough, one person gets to decide the situation that affects the entire world. That's insane. You go out onto the street and say, hey, we're going to let that guy rule the world for a day. What do you reckon?
Yeah.
You'd be like, no.
Well, this is...
But in this, it's a organisation.
Yeah.
And we've got committees and there's members and they're voting. There's this theatre that there's any choice there. People seem to just turn a blind eye to that. I find it very strange.
Well, it's very cliche and easy to just point at Bill Gates and go, he's the evil guy that's running the world. But then when you see everything that has been happening over the last few years, the profits that he drives from the companies...
The amount of land, ironically, that he's purchasing... If he would like us to stop talking about it, it would be great if he could just stop doing... weird things that play into an attempted global policy.
Yeah, so it could be. I guess now I'm just seeing in my head this potential future of like, well, we couldn't do it with everyone else, like for the people. We couldn't get everyone to comply, but what we can do is rid them of their food source and then present them with a viable option. And again, they won't get that. They won't get everyone else to comply, but that does seem enough. Yeah, I don't care how sinister it sounds or how conspiratorial it sounds. It probably sounds far more factual given what we've seen over the last 5 years. As a businessman trying to make a business decision, that's all he seems like he's making. He's making these decisions going, right, well, how can I benefit my business? Well, here's an effect of this action. How can I profit off of that? It's not even just one thing. It's like it's that constant rollover. If I could say anything to people that are listening, I would say, please have a look at the documents. Because when you say conspiratorial, I'm like, this is the one where it is, and Aligned Council of Australia has broken a lot of those down into very pretty, which is good,
graphics and stuff as well, and looking at the different points, underscoring that surveillance and censorship and cost associated. But this is the one. This is why because I like working in this space and speaking to all these different people. But this is the one that really gets me like, excited, because it is literally black and white.
Yeah,
like it's all there.
Yeah,
and it can all be linked in a beautiful, beautiful web. So I would highly, highly recommend people go and check it out.
For 1 second, let's play devil's advocate.
Oh yeah, okay.
For Bill Gates again. Okay.
For God's sake.
We're going to play devil's advocate. He's in a position where he's trying to do good for the world. Let's assume.
Who asked him? Is my first.
Exactly. He's in a position where, okay, I've got a lot of money. How can I help the world? I'm going to put money into the World Health Organization. And what I've learned now is that we are at the threat of a pandemic treaty, a pandemic. So I'm going to put my money into potentially helping thwart that, or maybe if it does occur, we've got things in place where we can benefit people. Do you know what? I've realized, there's another option for a potential pandemic if it spills out zoologically and we have to cull all these animals. Okay, well, maybe I make the world a viable option just in case. Whether I profit off that, well, that's neither here nor there, but I'm just doing what I know is potentially the future. And I'm doing it for the benefit of everyone else. That's me playing devil's advocate, but that's what you could argue.
Listen to the hoops you had to jump through to try and do it.
I agree.
Was that a clear idea or plan of action?
Yeah. So
absolutely not.
Can I just, Branchy, can I just take that, you've got a guy that started a computer company, and that computer company was the only company that needed to have antivirus software.
I'm sorry. And also, can we just note that you had to get the IP through negotiations from your mum?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Quickly, can I just also say, hilariously, who calls their company Microsoft? That is, I mean, like... I seen that in a meme the other day. Whose idea was it to call their company Microsoft? That's not very good for it. Anyway.
Two ladies on the pod. It fell flat. I'm so sorry.
It's just like, I find it quite weird.
Sorry, Katie, I interrupted you. But yes. That needed antivirus software.
Yeah, well, it's Microsoft needed antivirus software.
He's no good.
No, Apple didn't.
About as effective.
Yeah, that's interesting that he makes a program and then sells the software that protects the program.
Sells the solution.
Yeah.
I just think that was a formula which was useful back in the day, and maybe that's a formula that he continues to roll out and apply not only to humans under the pandemic agreement, but now this concept of One Health. We've got Bill Gates involved with making GMO mosquitoes so that you don't get malaria and things in the future. Goodness knows what that mosquito is going to do, and guess what? It's been released here in Australia, and it's released in most countries. Why do you need to have this fellow with his finger in all of these pies doing all of these things and against our wishes without our informed consent? And
this is the same guy who gave a lot of children in Africa AIDS, is that correct?
Wait.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, but I do. There was a lot of girls that got a particular vaccine, which were no longer.
Was he trying to cure AIDS though? Wasn't he? Was there a part?
Sorry, I was going down the Fauci route because obviously.
Was it Fauci?
Well, I think Bill Gates did some work in Africa, but with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But Fauci was also obviously having.
It was Fauci, yes.
But he also dealt with the AIDS crisis as well because he was still quite prominent.
And in that testing,
even that early
a lot of people died in the trials, and then they just was like, okay, well, let's move along.
I don't know about the Gates one. I only know about Fauci and AZT response in that way.
Was that? Am I getting them confused?
Potentially, I don't know.
Potentially, but they definitely met in 2020 and saw the benefit of vaccine to get us out of the pandemic. So that's certainly not denied now. And we've got, similar formulaic responses to a lot of different things that we've drawn on today. Identify or announce the problem, provide the solution, whether or not it's tested or trialled or fully exhausted in respect of safety trials, and encourage people to have it.
To return to your kind of Bill Gatesian hoop jumping scenario before.
Yes.
I don't think it's a radical thought to put forward that, if we have an organisation like the World Health Organization and we have member states that are contributing, that's not a problem. It's like, that's skin in the game. You're representing your people. But when that corporate and private interest and partnership infiltrates it and their say is as valued, if not more, when they have no skin in the game. Bill Gates isn't looking after Bill Gates' son and all of the people that he looks after. He's looking after a factory and how much money that factory is making and how much product it's turning over. He shouldn't have an equal stake in determining
Any say.
response or policy or anything. Yeah. And I don't think that that's a radical idea. That's essentially what we're saying in rejecting these, is that we want these decisions made by the people that we elect and that represent us.
Yeah.
Because we have an ability to keep them held to account here.
Well-
I don't have an ability to keep Tedros held to account if
Yeah.
he's just made a decision of like, it's a long way to Geneva.
Yeah.
That's-
And that's it. Reject all of them. We don't need them. We can make decisions for ourselves. We've got supposedly competent people. We do not need anything more than advice and recommendations, as long as that advice is not conflicted and not corrupted.
Do you think our government would ever put in place something mandatory again like that, like a mandatory curfew, mandatory lockdowns, mandatory vaccinations? Do you think they've realised that will never fly?
No, the best the best indicator of future behaviour is past behaviour.
And our compliance.
Okay. And what is our option to say no? Is that a potential criminal offence?
Yeah,
Under these-
potentially.
under this
Well,
new
certainly
treaty?
in Western Australia, if you refuse, you could face being forced to be vaccinated under your health legislation. That doesn't quite extend to a criminal act, but certainly being forced against your will, I think, is even worse than being charged criminally. I think realistically that could be where it's heading. But the more people that say no, they can't lock you all up. There's a huge power in that. And I'll tell you what, of the people that said no last time, they are in a much more empowered position than those that did comply and consequently were hurt.
Yeah. And the big question, or the big thing at the moment, is this withdrawing from parents doing their childhood vaccinations, and we see the rates dropping and dropping and dropping, and which from which I would suggest is it's great to see people showing discernment, but people are wondering why. And it's very clear that when you lie to someone for 5 years and gaslight them into taking a medical intervention, eventually they're going to say, wow, you lied to me about that. I need to be sure with this. And they've created this monster of which obviously it's far worse what they did, but this is the karma that you get. We are going to see people just more and more, and it's going to become more and more common. That's not going to rise. That'll drop and drop and drop because people are sick of it and they're sick of being told what to do. Which, if we're going to find any benefit or any positive, it's at least people are finding the courage to show some discernment and say, no, I'm choosing to be a little more cautious in my approach. Because I think we should all be cautious with any medication. Anything that, as we touched on before, anything that's broadly spread across the population without individuals being assessed for what genetic predispositions they have and what other issues they have, that should always be pushed back against, and we should always have our individual freedom and our right to choose. And if something like this treaty takes away that choice, then that is something that scares me and definitely needs to be pushed back against.
Agreed.
Definitely.
Is there? You've been on for a bit, and we're going to have 2 more episodes of this in different areas. So I don't want to touch on too much that we double. How long have we been going for? An hour and 42. So that's pretty decent. Is there anything you want to finish on? Anything, key points that you really want to bring up? Same with you, Chloe. That we do need to assess, and we probably really need to know about.
I think I'd probably just tie up on if they're selling it for your convenience or to make things easier for you, question it. Digital ID is very real. The under 16 bill will mean that we all have to have a digital ID. When they say it's easy for you to have your medical records online, it's not for your convenience that they're doing it. When you've got to go through the ATO, through MyGov or whatever it's now called, be aware of why that is. it's not for your convenience, it's for theirs, and it's allowing that surveillance to be made much easier. Ask questions about where your information is going. Speak to your doctors, because they're just rolling out protocols to respond to symptoms. Actually ask them to diagnose your problem. That is their job. They're not doing it. And if you need a 20 or 30-minute appointment, ensure that you get that 30-minute appointment and you get to the bottom of what the cause of your issue is. Because at the end of the day, you actually have to take responsibility for yourself. And insisting that you are in the driver's seat is the most powerful thing that you can do, because you are in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I love that. And surely instead of Penny Wong giving $100 million to the World Health Organization, it could go towards our public health system, where we could probably provide a little more time for these doctors to, one, be educated a bit further, maybe in nutrition and diagnosing these sorts of issues, but also give them a bit more time to diagnose and spend with their patients so they can prioritise them individually.
I'm pretty sure you did the math on that one, Katie. What was it, 77,000 nurses for the 100 million?
Yeah, and I think 200 and it was. I have to get the number out, but
that's going back a while.
it was at least 240,000 hip replacements.
Yeah.
Wow.
We did the math. We did the maths on some things that it could be better spent on.
Yeah, and it was we could employ. Yeah, it was something like 77,000, or at least give pay rises to 77,000 nurses, so that we had an increase of public health physicians and medical practitioners, as opposed to giving money to a globalist organisation that we don't know where that money is going to go, because we have no right to check or assess. So,
and also, we're sending that money now, but that doesn't mean we don't send more money in the future.
Well, that's correct. I mean, we'll go into this, but we can maybe say the figure. What's for pandemic preparedness? It's 5.
It's 31 billion, I think, a year that they've specified globally. That's the WHO and the World Bank and G20, and that's the amount that they think that is needed to be pandemic prepared. And then there's also the contributions and all sorts of extra things on top of that. So you've got the assessed contributions, which is the amount we have to pay, then the voluntary contributions that they're just giving away, then you've got the public-private partnerships, which is these donations that come with the hooks, and then you've got our compliance costs. So it just keeps going. This isn't free to continue, to conduct all this surveillance.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to deep dive into those areas as well. The cost and censorship, they're going to be the next 2 episodes. Who are we joined by with those ones?
Oh, they're not confirmed yet. So
okay.
I can't actually say. I was hoping to get a message. I've got a missed call during this recording, so I'm hoping that that's confirmation for next Wednesday's guest.
Yes, cool. Yeah, we will be doing those 2 areas, even if it means just me and Chloe can do one of them. I will question everything. But thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, Katie. Is there one final plug, anything you want to get out there?
Can I plug Katie Ashby Coppens? Because Katie, I'm plugging you. Katie is
then.
hard-working people that I have encountered over the past few years, and the dedication that she has and the discipline that she has, I'm just astounded by. So I feel very, very lucky to work with her, and everyone should feel very, very lucky to have listened to her today. But that's my opinion. Personal.
I definitely appreciate your time, and when you're presenting things in inquiries and stuff to our governments, that's it's great to have someone like you on our podcast and getting that information out there. So thanks so much, and I'm sure we'll have you back sometime.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.